In this chapter, we're going to procedurally model our windows and door, and we're going to cut them out from the building we've made so far. So in order to create our templates, again we're going to start off with something coming out of, let's bring that down to here, something coming out of this brick node. So let's create another null. So let me move my roof construct a bit closer there. So in my null here, let's call this doors and windows. There we go. So we'll filter out our bricks over here again. So this time I'm going to create another bound node because I don't want all the bricks. I just want to simplify it down again to the raw shape here. And what I want to do is I want to create a line that goes around with some dots on it that I can copy the shape of my windows to. The same way we kind of did the bricks. So I just want to create a line around the top here. So this time I'm going to create my bound node. And what I'm going to do is just bring down the lower padding there. In fact, I don't need to bring down the padding at all. Yeah, that's fair enough. So yeah, let's just leave that around the thing. What I'm going to do is actually poly split it instead. So I'm going to hit tab and type poly split. So again, this geometry is not going to change because we created it. So I'm happy to use sort of manual tools for certain things. Now to use the poly split, you hold your cursor over the 3D view and you can hit enter, and it gives you controls to split the polygons. Now I don't want the shortest path. I'm going to change the mode here to edge loop, so we'll get an edge loop going around. Now if you middle roll your mouse, you can see you can change the divisions. If you get it on the edge there, from 1 to multiples. I'm going to come down to 1 division. That'll allow me to now snap at the center here. If I left click, I now end up with an edge loop around the center. Now, the nice thing about using this tool is I can turn on edge group, and it's now selected those points in a group for me. If I create a blast node, I can delete that group. So we can select the group up here and delete it. In fact, I don't want to delete that group. I want to delete non-selected. So I've deleted everything except that group. Let me turn on point display. And you'll see that it's deleted all the geometry, but it's kept the points, if I template that, from where that line was. Which is what I wanted to do. But I don't want them as a bunch of points. What I need to do is actually have them as primitives or lines, so I can resample them to get the number of points that I want for to represent windows and doors, etc. So for that we're going to use an add sop. And an add sop is great for adding geometry together to create curves again and doing other stuff. If we select the add sop, we can go to polygons here and just turn on group, and you'll see it joins them all together. We can hit closed if we want, but I don't want a closed shape. Now that's pretty much how Now I'm just checking that my curve here, the forward, faces the z-axis, which it does, because that's going to be my front. I don't want any windows at the back of the house. I want some windows along the side, windows along the front, and a front door. So that's going to be the front of the curve there. So I'm just checking that that is orientated correctly. Now what I want to do is actually split this up into 3 separate primitives. That way I can control their subdivisions separately. If we look on the information at the moment, we see we only have one primitive. This is one curve. So it's very easy to split that up. We can use a polycut node. So if I hit tab and type polycut, let's plug that in. This doesn't do anything at the minute. You'll see I still only have one primitive. What we want to do is we want to not remove, we want to cut. And we want to put a star in, so we'll cut all the points. If I look at the information now, you'll see that we have 3 primitives. If I turn on primitive numbers, you'll see each one is represented by a curve, each line here is represented by a primitive number. So before the add sop, you'll see there is just one primitive 0. Now there's 3, one for each line. So that's going to allow me now to control each of these lines separately. So I want to split them up. And to do that, I want to treat this front one separately from the two side ones. We'll have the same number of windows on each side in this case, and we'll control the front one independently. So I said I wanted to split them up, and to do that I can use the split node. So hit tab and type split. Oh, hit tab and type split. There we go. And this will just let us split up the node. What you do is you type in the group up here. Now actually I want primitive 1. So I'm going to type 1 in, and you'll see the split returns primitive 1. It actually returns primitive 1 out of this output, and the rest of the geometry out the other output. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit tab and type transform, because I want to transform this line separately. If I hit enter, we can see actually the pivot's not at the center of the line. So we can use another expression down here on the transform node. If you open up the pivot transform, as you saw before, we can move the pivot around from here. What we want to do is have the pivot at the center of this curve. And we've seen how we've used $y_min and $y_max to get the bounding box, but also we have the centroid, which is the center of it. And we can use an expression for that, which is $CEX. So that's putting the pivot in X at the centroid in X, and then $CEY, and then $CEZ. And what you'll see is now move the pivot to the centroid of the object, which is the center of it, which is a bit more useful there. And this will give me an option to scale this in and out. Now if I do that in relation all the way up here to the rest of the bricks, what we can see is we can actually scale in and move where our windows want to be across or wherever. So we can make them further apart or closer together here. What I'm then going to do is create my window template. So let's create a box for the window. Let's hit tab and type box. So we'll call this box window, just so we know what that's creating. And the proportions I want for my window will be, let's try 0.6 and 0.85, and we'll sort of leave it 1 unit. Let me template that. 1 unit in depth there. If I just template the rest of the building here and show you my box, so the window will sort of be that proportion, and it's deep because I'm going to I want it to be thicker than the walls here. So I want to copy that into position. So we'll hit tab and use our copy to points node. And we'll see it's now copied those to the two places where I might want them in the building there. Let's template the end of the building so we can see them in relation to the height there. What we could do is after this curve is add another transform node, so we can just move it up and down if we want. So let's hit tab and type transform, pop that in after the add, and again to make sure the pivot's in the center we'll do $CEX, $CEY, $CEZ, and then in this transform I can now move all my windows up and down. Is that probably the best place to do it? You know what, I'll just move these ones independently. Let's put the transform there. We can decide what to do with that later. So now I can move them after the event. So I'll put them somewhere like that. Now what I want to do is do these side ones. So again, let's pull out a copy of this transform node. So we'll look at the side ones here. Let's set the scale back to 1. And I'm going to plug in the second output of the split there into this transform. Now we want to scale it in the other axis here, in the Z. Let's pull those in. Let's pull those in. And again, we'll want to control them with a sort of a height a bit later on, but we'll worry about that in a moment. So again, I want to copy the same window here, but if I use my copy to points, let's just hit Alt and left click and drag that over, and I copy the new transform in. We'll see that even though it copies them on, they're not orientated correctly because they need to be flipped 90 degrees. That's no problem. I'll just add a transform node there before we plug that box in, and then on this one we'll just flip them 90 degrees. There we go. So if I look at this new copy to points, they're in the right place. Now I actually want control here, so the user could either have two windows far apart, or if they get too close then we just want one window. In this case I do actually want one window, so I'm actually going to add a fuse node, and what the fuse node will do, let's add that into these two side points here. This will fuse points within a certain distance. Now let's increase that distance, and as we do you'll see it fuses them, but then they disappear. They disappear because we're telling it here to remove unused points. Let's turn that off so we can keep the unused single points. And there we go, we've got our single thing. And if we move the distance far apart enough, then it's outside the fuse distance and we get our two windows appearing. So that's a really nice way to make sure you only get one or two windows. Let's just have one window in there for now. Excellent. So we've got these guys, and these are our side windows, but they're a little high. So in order to make sure there's a parity to be between these guys, what we'll do is we'll actually merge them first, and then we'll transform them both together. There we go. So all the windows stay at the same height here. And we've got some controls. We can make these windows go bigger and have two or single ones at the side there. And then with this transform node, we can make these outer windows further apart or closer together. Now the last bit I want to do is make a shape that represents my door here. Let's just pop these out a bit. So this will be copy to points front windows so I don't get lost, and then this will be copy to points side windows. There we go, so we know what each one's doing. So my door, if you like, is actually off this curve here. Now we can take the transform, but what I'd really rather do is come out with a fresh one. So let's just make a new null over here. Let's feed this off and call this door template. So we've got the fresh curve here. So what I really want to do is actually snap this curve down to a single point. So again we could use a fuse, and then we can make the distance really big, and then just turn off remove unused points. So that's going to keep us our point at the center of that curve. And if we template the windows here, that'll be between the two windows, which is what I want. So now what we need really is a door model. So let's make another box. Running out a bit of room here, aren't I? So let's select all these nodes and just drag those over a bit. There we go. So this box will be my door template. And let's make this maybe 1.5 meters high, 1.5 units high. And then I'm going to create a, let's template that. So we've got our box here, and I want the box to sit on the floor. So we'll create a transform node, and we'll offset it to the floor by typing in the translate y, we've seen this before, -$y min, so it matches the -y bounding box. So even though we can adjust the height of the door here, he'll always sit on the floor. That's important because that's where I want to copy it to in a minute. Now if I look at my point here, my point is where I want the door to be, but it's not on the floor. I'm going to copy with the bottom of my box to where that point is. So I need this point to actually sit on the floor. So we can also do the same trick with the same transform here. So let's pop that transform after that point, and you'll see that snaps him to the floor as well, because we're using the well, the y min and y max are the same for a single point, but it's just offsetting it back to the origin by putting it minus its position. So now we've got our point at the origin, but in the right place in relation to our windows, and we've got our box sitting on the origin. We can simply use a copy to points, and our door will copy to the right place. There we go, he's sitting on the floor there. So if we merge all of these together now, so we merge the door and the windows, we'll see all of our templates here. We can see them in relation, see those in relation to the rest of the building here. And we can adjust the transform height here of the windows. We can adjust where the windows might want to go. Let's move them a little bit down below the door there. And then we can come and adjust the door's height or the width and stuff on the house. And as you saw before, we could come to the end here. We can scale those out and get 2 windows if we want, or put them back to be 1. And then we can come to the window model and change the shape, have them larger windows if we want. And you could split this up further and have different shape boxes for the side windows, etc. So what are we going to do with this template? Well, like we did before, we're going to Boolean this slot away from our bricks. Let's just move our bricks over here a bit. So I'm going to just tidy this up a bit. So you select some nodes and you do Shift L, it will just lay out those selections. So I'll just do that here a bit. Just lay out some of the nodes. There we go. And let's put a in fact, let's put a null at the end here. We'll call it door and windows. So door and windows template out, because it's a template, isn't it? So we'll just call this one the template as well. We've got a little minus instead of an underscore. Let's just change that correctly. There we go. So we've got the template out, and we'll put that in its own net box. We'll call this, there we go, Windows and Door template. There we go, we'll give it another funky colour. Sometimes you run out of all the colours that you might want to give things. Cool, so we've got our little template there. So again, we want to create a for loop just like this, exactly the same, and remove these guys one at a time. Remove these guys from those bricks. So we can literally just copy and paste this entire network. So I'm going to select this whole loop and all the compile bits like this. Make sure you get the connectivity at the top, and then holding down Alt, we can left click and drag. Just drag the whole loop down. And then what you want to do is plug the output of the compile into the next connectivity. And then this time you want to plug the output of your doors and windows here into the second input here of the loop. Now if we come down to the bottom here and click on the compiled end, see, that's not quite the effect we were after. The reason it's not the result we're after is because this guy here was set to intersect, and we don't want the intersection here on our Boolean. What we want is it to simply subtract them. So let's change this to subtract, and there we go. We see we've subtracted those shapes from our building here. And we can go back, and as you can see, we can go to the door. We can change the height of the door, and that'll cut a bigger or smaller hole in there. Or we could grab the height of our windows here, move our windows up and down, and it's doing a lot of things, which is why it's going a bit slow, but it's optimized because we are using our compiled loop here. You can see how slow it is actually if you try and click on the for each end. So let me just move these over a little bit, and you can see that we're slowly beginning to form the shape of our house here. So the next thing I want to do actually is to refine the look of these bricks, because they look a bit rubbishy really, and I wanted an old stone looking house. So what we're going to do is we're going to process each of these bricks to make them look stone. So I'm at the end of this kind of network here at the minute, so what I'm going to do is just try and squish this up a bit and make some better real estate. And what we're going to do is create a null here. because at this point we've got low-res bricks. I'm going to call these low-res bricks out. And there we go. So these are the low-res bricks out, and we're at this stage. So what I want to do now is put some really nice detail into these bricks.